Good morning. My name is Devdip Ganguli, and on the sidelines of the Pondi Lit Fest 2022, Pariksith Singh, Dr. Pariksith Singh and myself are having a conversation about two books that have been recently released, and I am truly delighted and honored to be sitting with Pariksith ji to talk about first his book Sri Aurobindo and Philosophy, which is being launched at the Pondi Lit Fest. Sir, would you like to tell us a little bit about the content, the approach that you have taken in your book?
Sure, thank you Devdip. It is a pleasure to be with you talking about my favorite theme, subject, interest, Sri Aurobindo. And the book is Sri Aurobindo and Philosophy. The approach to Sri Aurobindo can be taken from 1,001 perspectives because he's so vast, and you can take one section, one aspect of his personality, and after you have exhausted it, if you ever can, then you realize you've just started. And of course, Sri Aurobindo was a giant, had tremendous impact on Indian darshana, which we have forgotten, we don't understand, we don't remember, and that is our collective or selective amnesia. But also his impact on Western philosophy, and that was of tremendous interest to me. So what he brought to Western philosophy, even though in some letters he has said that he's not a philosopher, he brought a different way of approaching philosophy, a way of intuition, a way of synthetic thought, bringing all the diverse aspects of Western philosophy into one, and giving it sight, darshana, which is what we call drishti, the ability to see. That Western philosophy had not focused on. That is, Western philosophy focuses on reason, intellect. So that was a tremendous contribution, and if you read him, he is talking about such a vast subject and he takes everything in his embrace. That is a tremendous approach. Normally Western philosophy is analytic, dissecting, it cuts it into pieces. He brings it together, he's integral in his approach to philosophy. And of course, with a greater sight, samagra drishti, what we call, you bring everything together. To Indian philosophy, unfortunately, after 400, 500, 600 years or more of subjugation, we kind of forgot who we were, and we forgot our ancient roots. We forgot the relevance, the significance of the growth of our civilization, where we started, where we are, the continuity. So he brought the Vedas back to us. He showed us that the Vedas can be seen in a spiritual light, in a very vast, comprehensive manner. He dealt with every theme, every symbol, image in the Veda, and he showed us that the Vedas are not naturalistic hymns or hymns just of a barbarian age, but of a very advanced and refined civilization that used to see things in a different way. Now intellectually when we read it, it seems different, but to any poet, when you see a symbol, and if you look at even modern symbolism, each symbol has a different impact. It is not objective, it is not subjective. And then he brings the continuity of the Vedas to the Upanishads, brings it down through the Tantras, through the Puranas, and comes down through Adi Shankaracharya, and then he comes to Swami Vivekananda, and then Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans. So the giants, the illuminates of our civilization, he shows the continuity. So that was his tremendous, a great contribution, and I think it is something that our critics have missed, we have missed, and it's something, if we can bring it to our new generation to start looking at what a tremendous achievement it was. He stands for me in the line of, say, Sri Krishna, in the approach to philosophy, Adi Shankaracharya, or even if you go to the Vedic age, Rishi, sage Vashisht, or a Vishwamitra. That is the relevance, Veda, Vyasa. So that was the humble attempt to bring him out in little essays, which each kind of deals with a theme and talks about one aspect of his philosophy, which is a vast philosophy. Whether it's spiritual philosophy, whether it's on evolution, whether it's Heraclitus, whether he takes Plato, whether he talks about Mayavad, it is so vast. Or you come to linguistic philosophy, you come to cultural philosophy, political philosophy, educational philosophy. It is now mythology, how he approached mythology. Now each of these is a separate department in a university, but he in his tremendous vision brought it all together. And they're all connected, it's all integrated. So that's the beauty of his approach, and thought, if we can call it thought, a very refined, high-level thought. That brings me to your book, because your book is similar in approach, in small, shall we say, quantum packets, each sufficient in itself, each brought by a different author. And so I would like to talk about also your book, Reading Sri Aurobindo, edited by Gautam Chikarmane and you, Devdip Ganguli.
Yes.
Please tell us about this book, what inspired you, and what is your attempt with this?
So, listening to you, Pariksith ji, what occurs to me is that you have obviously drawn from many different volumes of Sri Aurobindo's works.
Yes.
And not everyone is as fortunate or as capable to know always what the different volumes are talking about. People often ask us this question, what should I read in Sri Aurobindo? And when they come across the various writings of Sri Aurobindo, just from the names sometimes it can be difficult to get a sense of what they are in for.
Yes.
And so we thought that for the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo, it would be nice to have a volume that gives a kind of general introduction to the entire collected works, complete works. The complete works is a project that actually culminated just a few years ago, and so we felt it was the right time to bring out a book that would be helpful for persons who want to enter into Sri Aurobindo's vast body of literature and writing, but don't know where to begin. So what we did is we invited 19, Gautam and I have also written chapters for the book, but we invited 19 other authors to write on a chapter, on a volume that they are familiar with, and to give not a summary but an introduction to the volume, so that the reader, when he reads, say, a chapter on the life divine, knows that okay, this book deals with integral yoga philosophy and how he compares it with the various other traditions and so on. So we took all the 36 volumes, and of course some of the books are in 2 volumes, so we have 31 chapters in total, and that is the approach that we have taken. I really feel that it's time for people to engage with Sri Aurobindo's writings.
Yes.
And there is of course a tendency, we always like to know from someone or listen to someone, and that is very helpful. And certainly books like yours are very important guides, because they give a certain context and they set people who know what they are looking for already to get to the source.
Yes.
And our book is more geared towards someone who has heard of Sri Aurobindo, who would like to read Sri Aurobindo, but they are apprehensive. And there is a common refrain that is heard, that Sri Aurobindo is difficult to read, his English is not comprehensible. And I'm sure I would in fact like to hear from you, what do you say to that? Because I've heard it so often.
Yes.
And I mean, my own sense of course is that there is a truth in it, but it is not as challenging as it seems to be. What is your feeling about this problem?
See, so several things come into this. It is, one is, we Indians have the ability, or had the ability, and I believe we still do, of being very subtle, of thinking subtly, sukshma vichar, refined thoughts, we had that in ample amount. If you go back to the Upanishads, to the Brahmanas, to the Puranas, and then Indians thought a lot. It is, people think that we discarded thought. Indians thought a lot, discussed a lot. The Shastrarthas that happened, it was not intellectual debate, but it was a deepening of thought or heightening of thought. But that thought is comprehensive. Most of us, our modern education has taught us to divide, to dissect. Take the butterfly and cut pieces. The original thought was a samagra drishti, or a comprehensiveness, systematic, methodical, detailed, but still keeping the comprehensive at the same time. That is where people find difficulty. This language is actually not that difficult. If you read someone like a Derrida or a Heidegger, you will get confused with their contortions. I mean, you pull your hair out. Heidegger will create his own words, right? He does not create his own words. He's simplifying, and he simplifies, dissects in a way that is a comprehensive way. He doesn't kill the butterfly. He brings the butterfly in all its glory. So to read him, you have to have that training, and it takes time, but once you get used to it, it's very difficult after that to read the analytic philosophers. Yes, the English is classical. He's a classical writer. So nowadays we are into the 30-second attention span. If we run any kind of conversation, it is 50 seconds, then we are done. So this is a different age, this is a different generation. But even in my generation, it was difficult to read Sri Aurobindo. But it is a self-development. As you develop yourself, as you start seeing things coming together, connected, it's like an ecosystemic approach. Everything is part of one. So you will see in the Life Divine, he'll take one subject and he'll take 50 pages to describe it, because he'll look at every aspect of it. In every sentence, he's including every aspect of it. And that is a very different way to look at things. So my only take on this is, yes, let's try to simplify him. But as Einstein said, right, simplify as much as you can and then no more, right? So yeah, simplify him, introduce him in a manner that kind of is not a dumbing down, but a simple introduction.
Yes.
Like a prelude before a symphony, you have a little few notes. But then to get the fullest joy out of him, we have to develop the ability to read him. And we can start with simple things like The Hour of God. We can start with some simpler poems, and that is our job. Simpler poems that people can understand, like his sonnets, Baji Prabhu. People can relate to that. And then people can go to higher levels. But reading him is maturing, is self-growth. Now, people who are not interested in self-growth, in self-refinement, they will not progress with him. But as you read, you find new layers, like an oyster. There's a new layer underneath another layer, and it opens up in resplendence. So that is my approach. I think you should simplify.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you entirely. And in fact, I feel that it is more of a mental block than a real difficulty. And yes, certainly some of the texts, the Life Divine especially, is challenging because there are long sentences. And today people want things to be so simplified that it's almost simplistic.
Yes, that's correct.
And as you very rightly pointed out, if you're dealing with a reality which is complex, then no one simplifies that complex reality as well as Sri Aurobindo does.
That's correct.
And so it is only a question of patience, habit, practice.
Yes.
And above all, I feel that each of his books carry his consciousness.
Yes.
And even to spend time with them, whatever the level of understanding, is a process of growth and greater deepening.
It is.
And I remember in this context what the mother advised to one of the students who wanted to read Sri Aurobindo, saying that read a little bit regularly every day, and slowly your brain will open to the ability to read him. And the other point which you made, and which we have also covered in our book, is that he has a lot of material. There is no need to start from something that you find difficult.
Yes.
There is, and it's also something that can appeal to your interest. So if you are interested in world, the going-ons of the world,
Yes.
the political realities,
Yes, yes.
then you would turn to the ideal of human unity or the human cycle.
Yes.
If you are drawn to mystical knowledge, you might turn to the secret of the Veda, and so on and so forth.
Yes, yes.
And I certainly feel that our approach for Gautam and I has been that we would like to make people aware that there is so much,
Yes.
there is a whole treasure waiting for our discovery.
Yes,
And if the book helps them to kind of reach the source,
that's right.
we would feel
I
we
think
would feel very happy.
that's
Yes.
the best thing. We kind
Yes.
of, our job is to, if I may say it humbly, is to invite people to experience him directly.
Yes, exactly.
And if we can
Exactly.
facilitate that some
Yes.
way, in some way,
Yes.
that itself is a great
Yes.
blessing and an honor to be able
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
So tell me the challenges that you found, because bringing him to the, this is published by Penguin.
Yes.
So you're mainstream,
Yes.
and now bringing that which was hidden, almost esoteric, you've brought it out in this modern age where everything is out,
Yeah.
reality shows and
Yeah.
everything. So tell me about the challenges you had.
Well, we were, I mean, initially surprised that Penguin was even interested in a book of this nature. And when we had submitted our proposal, for a long time there was silence, to be fair.
Yes.
And there was nothing really happening. But I think that this year there is a certain momentum, and there is something which is pushing things to manifest.
Yes.
And we felt, Gautam and I have been discussing this, we felt completely sustained, as if something else was making its way, and we only had to put the pieces together and kind of carry the thing forward. But we ourselves felt that a lot of things which are quite difficult to explain took place. So for example, the fact, as you mentioned, that Penguin was interested in the book, we also explained to them that we were not interested in focusing only on the aspects of Sri Aurobindo that people usually latch onto.
Yes.
The nationalist movement,
Yes.
the freedom struggle, which is very important, no doubt.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there is an entire Sri Aurobindo which is waiting to be discovered, and
That's
for
right.
which he, his whole life was in that direction.
Yes.
So we were also pleasantly surprised that we had a very understanding publisher, a very understanding editor with whom we worked, Mili Ashwarya,
Yes.
and they were on board for us to not have to focus on any one aspect, but to present him fully.
Yes.
So we, in fact, we refer to Sri Aurobindo in the book as the supramental sage. That
Yes.
is kind of the subheading, which is not on the cover, but it is there on the jacket.
Yes.
And you'll find it in the introduction as well. We say Sri Aurobindo, the supramental sage. Now it's a word which someone can object to, saying, what does it even mean? We don't
Right.
even know what it means. Our approach was, find out what it means.
Yes.
If you read him, you will know what it
Yes.
means.
Yes.
For us, he is the supramental sage, and his time has come.
Right.
And the other interesting thing was that all the contributors have been very forthcoming. They submitted their articles on time, and they were very cooperative. And right from the beginning, we said that we want to make this project an offering, and so all the contributors were on board with that. And we are offering all the royalties and whatever we have got from the book, instead of distributing it amongst the contributors and writers, we are offering it to the ashram, and that we felt was also a very important facet, so that it's something which is part of a larger purpose for this year. Yeah.
I think that's it's important, because this is his 150th
Yes. Yes.
birth anniversary.
Yes.
It is the 75th anniversary of
Yes.
India's independence,
Yes.
and it's quite appropriate
Yes.
that such a
Yes.
book be brought
Yes.
out into the mainstream. It's
Sir, I'm aware that apart from this book, you have
Ji.
also been instrumental in bringing out a number of other volumes. You
Ji.
have been working towards creating a new kind of publishing scene, if I may call it.
Ji.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about what your vision is with your publishing efforts?
I think I'll just tell you about my very personal and selfish, selfless interest in this. I would like the children, the future generation, to be able to read him to be introduced to him, to know him like we would read, say, someone like a Plato, right? Or we would hear about someone like a Shankaracharya, even though, and if you have slightest interest in the university, his thought, his great achievements, whether it's in the practical world, whether it's a commentary, bhashya on the Gita, which is incidentally is probably the best introduction or commentary on the Gita. Children need to be able to read him and approach him, and that's was our intent. Just like your approach, how do we restore the future back to Sri Aurobindo's vision, or as my friend Parthuji very eloquently says, restore Bharat to Sri Aurobindo's vision. And I think there is so much to learn from him, so much to grow just by reading him. So our intent in a very humble way is bring out various aspects of him that can be, whether it's in education, whether it's in literature, whether it's in philosophy, whether it's his discussion about the Vedas or the Upanishads or the Gita, bring it in a simple manner to the modern reader and explain that. And it should be mainstream. He is mainstream. As far as I'm concerned, he's the only stream and everything else comes into him. I think that is our goal too. And just like your attempt, Penguin publishing it, our attempt is similar. Because a lot, it was ignored. The kind of a narrative was built by modern critics that his work was not on par with great literature. I think he's probably to India what Shakespeare is to English. And the achievements that he has done are so significant that they cannot be missed. And this modern criticism that has kind of overlooked his contribution needs to be brought up to speed, and a course correction, if I may use the word, where people can talk about his philosophy. Let's discuss his philosophy. You have a disagreement, discuss it. People don't know, they've never read, and they put him down. Right? So, okay, let's debate, let's discuss, let's critique. And that should be the approach. We should be able to talk about him like we can talk about any Mahatma Gandhi. We should be able to discuss him like any great thinker of modern time, whether it's Einstein or Fritjof Capra or the Story of Philosophy by Will Durant. Tremendous achievement has been done for our nation and for our culture, which has not ended. It is continuing. It is still remolding India. Today we are carrying on his vision, and in his vast embrace we are continuing his work. We are still influenced by him. We believe that the future generation would be influenced, whether consciously or subconsciously. Our attempt is to make it a conscious process, and this would be a legacy that we can be a part of. I think this is important. I think the fact that you have brought from the beginning, from the earliest days, and I was reading a line where Sri Aurobindo in 1940s, 50s did not want to publish things he had written earlier because his thought had evolved. And that is his greatness. He continuously evolves. And as I read after almost 36 years, I see that every time I go back to him, I find something new. So I have evolved in reading him. So 36 years ago, we didn't understand him. Today I understand him a little bit, and I have grown. Right? My joke is, I approached Sri Aurobindo, I said, you have become better in 36 years. But the truth is, one has grown, and that you will see constantly. And I think everyone should have the opportunity, our young generation, our children should have the opportunity to be able to immerse themselves in it and have a natural growth, natural evolution, if I may use the word. So I know you've been interested in education a lot, you're part of the ashram, and you said there are things that have changed. I would like to hear your thoughts more about it. What are the things that have changed that Penguin is bringing it out? Have you noticed anything particular? So Devdip ji, you had mentioned earlier that you're seeing a subtle shift, if I may quote you correctly or paraphrase you rather, you're seeing a subtle shift that mainstream publishers are beginning to accept Sri Aurobindo. Tell me more about it. That interests me a lot. Have you noticed anything particular, anything subtle that is happening?
I think that there is a general change that is taking place where we are becoming more comfortable about exploring our own knowledge systems, our own traditions, our own roots, and this is manifesting in various ways.
Yes.
And I mean, sometimes not necessarily all positively, but the general thrust of it is unmistakable and inevitable, because what it means is that we are finally becoming comfortable being ourselves.
Yes.
And whatever we are, what's and all, it is ourselves.
Yes.
And when we acknowledge who we are,
Yes.
we can recognize what needs to develop and change and evolve.
Yes. Yes.
And we can tap into the deep sources of knowledge and identity that we have.
Yes.
And I think as a part of that trend, Sri Aurobindo is gradually being seen as somebody who has guidance for the civilization, the culture and the people. He is someone who years before has already looked into the future, looked into the past,
Yes.
brought forth the jewels of the past and put us on a trajectory towards upward change and growth. And his vision, as he himself said, is of course for the world.
Right.
But it begins here.
Yes.
It begins in India. India has, for whatever reason, been the home of that wisdom,
Yes.
which Sri Aurobindo is naturally taking forward to the next step.
Yes.
And this is a change that one can see at every level. As my co-editor Gautam often likes to point out, that Sri Aurobindo has been cancelled in our academic environments,
Yes.
in our setups. You do not really have a serious study of Sri Aurobindo, and which is surprising because he can be studied through the prism of literature,
Yes.
through the prism of philosophy,
Yes.
through philology,
Yes.
through, I mean, numerous
Poetry.
poetry, so many approaches, and you do not find him given the adequate weight
Yes.
that he more than deserves. And so it is, I think it is encouraging
Yes.
that now there is a general seeking for identity, for a seeking for trying to understand who we are as a people, as a culture,
Yes.
as
Yes.
a nation. Where do we stand in relation to our past,
Yes.
in relation to the future, in relation to the world?
Yes.
And when we turn to the writings of Sri Aurobindo, we find answers to those questions.
Yes.
And which is why I think even mainstream publishers are eager to explore and
Yes.
to promote, to encourage
Yes.
this kind of
Yes. So
seeking.
the resurgence, if I may say, of
Yes.
interest
Yes.
or the renaissance
Yes.
of India's literature and self-exploration and philosophy is something that is not just political. There's so much news about the political polarity right now.
Yes.
But it's not just political. What
Yes.
I'm hearing,
Yes.
what you're saying is, it's also cultural. That normally the thinker, any thinking Indian would want to know who I am,
Yes.
and we are comfortable with ourselves. And that's the big change. Whether it's in education, whether it's in even literature, whether it's in our history or philosophy of history, whether it's even our mythology, our ability to take our mythology as it is and say what it is, rather than always trying to defend ourselves from other ways of seeing at the world. And I agree with you. I think that is a tremendous shift. Much work has to be done. I mean,
Yes.
tremendous. But it's
Yes.
almost like a polarity shifting to the other side.
Yeah.
And in physics, we used to talk about the polarized light, if you remember.
Yes.
And if you go 90 degrees, it disappears, and you go, just all you have to do is turn 90 degrees and suddenly it's there, because it's
Yes.
all along one
Yes.
axis. I think this is a healthy sign. I don't see it as a problem that this fierce debate is going on, and I think there should be more civilized discourse rather than fighting about it. There should be a civilized discourse and a deepening of our exploration into who he is.
Yes.
And along with him, other great leaders like, say, Swami Vivekananda,
Yes.
or Sri Ramakrishna
Yes.
Paramhans. And going back to the Vedas, let's rediscover them,
Yeah.
and let's debate them, let's argue about them. But you can only argue when you understand something, when you have
That's right.
studied, and you've steeped yourself in something.
That's right.
And that, I think, steeping, that deepening, first becoming aware of what we have is the secret.
Yes. Parikshit ji, I have grown up in Pondicherry, and my family has been associated with the ashram since a few generations. But I'm curious to know, how was your introduction to Sri Aurobindo? I know that you have not lived in Pondicherry for any prolonged period of time. So I'm curious to know, what was your entry into the world and philosophy of Sri Aurobindo?
Well, I was fortunate enough when I was a teenager. I had just entered medical school, and at that time I had a very wonderful friend and mentor who introduced me to the world of literature, and then Sri Aurobindo. So I used to go to Aurobindo Ashram in New Delhi, and spent a lot of time there. And when you're young, you're idealistic, you want to do a lot of things. But I was fortunate. I was introduced to some very simple and beautiful books that allowed me to explore the world of philosophy, of spirituality, of literature. These are all things I loved or developed a love for, and then it became a beautiful journey for me. And so now it's almost 36 years, and that learning has somehow come through, and all the subterranean subsoil, hidden springs have come out in these books. But it was more a practice, a spiritual practice, and trying to understand him. And I must say, it takes a long time to begin to understand. And that is not the difficulty of the language, that is difficulty of each person who's trying to live a life of yoga, if I may say, since we are using the words as they are. How does one live a life of yoga? And then an integral yoga. That itself is a huge contribution to Indian thought, to bring us back to the integrality of yoga. Before that, yoga had become what? Palayana, leave the world, escape, go take sannyas. Totally opposite of what Sri Krishna constantly tells Arjuna. Do not run away, fight, accept, your dharma. And the deepening of the dharma happens over the 18 chapters. Somehow we forgot that. So he brought us back to the realization, all life is yoga, and that itself is such a revelatory statement. That was a huge contribution, bringing us to an integral understanding of Vedanta, where Mayavad suddenly, which was misunderstood, that the world is all Maya, an illusionism, was reversed back to a universal realism. And then if you talk about Tantra, which had been kind of pushed away by thought, even though it is such a powerful way of meditation, the Vama Marga, he brought it as a higher Tantra brought it up in the Advaitic conception and brought it into his yoga. And then he takes it even further, right? The supermind, the principle, the dynamic principle, where all this is united. There's no separation between the will and the execution, between the being and the consciousness. And that itself is a tremendous, I wouldn't say it's not a new discovery, but it's bringing us back to our original understanding from the Vedas and Vedanta. But I'll reverse this question to you. You were born in that. I can say, to paraphrase the mother, I can say my soul was born in Pondicherry. But you are born into it. Doesn't that bring its own challenges? You were kind of into it, and then so how do you look at it with fresh set of eyes?
I mean, I think that, so to start with, it is a privilege and a blessing for myself to have had the opportunity to grow up in Pondicherry, in the ashram school, and to be in that environment. There are of course challenges of a different kind, where I think it is easy not to recognize the extent of what you are getting, the value of what you are getting, because sometimes persons can be in other environments where they really see a reality which is very, very different, and they would seek out for something that gives them those answers, whereas we have kind of been immersed in this atmosphere.
Yes.
Which doesn't mean that there are no challenges. I mean, we are not cut off from the world because we are in Pondicherry, in the middle of a city and a town. This is not an ashram which is remote in the Himalayas. So one does have a contact with the world. But having said that, I think it's important at some point to really recognize and realize the value of what we have got here. And I was fortunate that over time my eyes opened to the immensity of what we have been immersed in. I want to take up something that you mentioned about your entry into the world of Sri Aurobindo and his writings. Are there any books, both our books actually, are who would be hopefully helpful to people who would like to enter deeper into his writings? But I am curious to know, are there any other books that you would that you have read that you would recommend that have helped you in your own journey?
Yes, to me one of the biggest helps was reading his letters on yoga, and the first thing it did to me was how he individualizes his response to each sadhak, but what a vast, almost an encyclopedic knowledge comes up. So I learned a lot. 18 years of age, I was reading different letters. I would just read the letters, and again, things that would apply to me I would learn from, things that didn't apply, kind of passed on. Later I realized they applied or didn't. So letters on yoga is a beautiful introduction. His writings such as The Hour of God, simple, small, packet size approach. I loved his poetry, especially Baji Prabhu was I think underrated minor epic, probably as great a minor epic as say anything that is written by anyone in English. And that is something that impressed me a lot in those days. Very intense, but very sustained, very controlled, and probably modern poetry should love it because it is rocky, it is stark. So you would think that modern critics would appreciate it. Satprem's Sri Aurobindo and the Adventure of Consciousness was a great book, which early on was very helpful to me, just to understand. And Satprem has an interesting style, very precise, short, and it helped me a lot, especially when he said something, if I remember chapter 3 or chapter 4, consciousness is the key, and that hit home. Suddenly the whole world changes when you suddenly realize, suddenly the questions that were coming, suddenly they were brought to a clarity, like a laser sharp focus. So he was very helpful. Later, I think George's Vreckham's books are very helpful. See, I'm eclectic, then I love reading. The Mother on Sri Aurobindo is beautiful. If Sri Aurobindo is vast in his writing, Mother is very simple. So any small booklet by the Mother or discussions by her are a very good introduction, because she's direct. One line, two lines, lot of wisdom, intuition, cut through the chase, go right where go where the money is, as the Americans would say. So very simple, and most people that I have found from our generation relate more to the Mother, because of course there's the psychic bhava that comes in her dealings, but she's simple, and so that is very helpful. And then once you have gotten the kernel of the issue, then around it, when you reach Sri Aurobindo, then you understand, oh, he's talking about all that, because otherwise you get confused. He's talking about so much and you miss the point. But if the Mother gives you the point, then But I must tell you, there are certain books that are still in the process of learning about, like Savitri is a huge challenge in poetry. Most poems of his, I can handle it as in literature and criticism. Savitri is a work that you have to go beyond your own limitations and to kind of rediscover yourself, and that has been a challenge, but I think it's a beautiful challenge. So I would, if I have to say, Satprem is a good introduction. Vrekam, Mother herself. I've even enjoyed Peter Heath, The Many Lives of Sri Aurobindo, despite all the controversies, because the research, the granular detail that he has gone through and given all us the proof of everything,
Yes.
that was very helpful to me.
Yes.
So ignore the controversy,
Yes.
focus on the facts.
Yes.
History is the study of facts,
Yes.
not your ideas. You focus on the facts, ideas can be taken care of. So that is also is a great book. And then, Sri Aurobindo on himself is a very good introduction.
Absolutely.
Sri Aurobindo on the mother. The mother is a beautiful work. It's talking about the four aspects of the mother is just an amazing experience. And it keeps growing on you.
Yeah,
I think these are a good introduction to him.
Thank you, Parikshit ji. I enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to reading your book, and I hope that more and more we may engage, learn, and grow through the writings of Sri Aurobindo.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's my pleasure, my honor, and continue the great work that you're doing. And I hope you come up with more and more introductions to Sri Aurobindo's vast personality and different avatars, and you can help our new generation come to Sri Aurobindo direct.
Thank you.